When the submersible Artemis X began its slow descent into the frigid depths of the North Atlantic, the ship's crew had no reason to believe the day would become one of the most important in the history of Titanic exploration. For years, teams had returned to the site with increasingly sophisticated technology, mapping the wreck, collecting samples, and cataloging fragments of what remained of the once magnificent ocean liner. The mission scheduled for that morning was routine, a detailed survey of sediment displacement around the bow section. Nothing more. Yet the ocean had a way of hiding stories until the exact moment it wished to release them. The moment chosen this time was 4:17 as the submersible continued downward. The soft hum of its thrusters vibrated through the hull like the pulse of a sleeping creature. Inside the control chamber aboard the surface ship Horizon Sentinel, the team monitored live feeds from the submersible's cameras. Blackness enveloped everything. The only interruptions were small, scattered particles drifting through the water, like flecks of dust suspended in a sunbeam. Every expedition team member was familiar with that darkness. It was the darkness of miles-deep water, the darkness that had swallowed Titanic whole. The first anomaly appeared on sonar. A cluster of small, rectangular shapes uniform, tightly grouped, and too intentionally arranged to be metal scraps, showed up near the collapsed remains of Sea Deck. Dr. Elora Whitford, who had spent nearly 2 decades studying Titanic's wreckage, patterns, leaned forward as soon as her eyes caught the formation. She asked for a secondary scan. The shapes appeared again, clearer this time, aligned as if they had settled gently side by side along the ocean floor. No one could identify what they were, but the shapes stirred curiosity in the entire room. Something new lay waiting. The ROV, Mercy, was deployed. With mechanical grace, it glided beneath the submersible, descending into the rugged underwater terrain. The ocean floor came into view, revealing a haunting landscape shaped by rust, decay, and the passage of time. Shattered beams lay like bones. Metal plates buckled into contorted shapes. Orange rusticles, alive with bacteria, clung to every surface. The silence of the deep was absolute. Then, the ROV's lights slid across something unexpected. At first, it seemed like debris thin, faintly shimmering, half buried in layers of sediment. But as the ROV moved closer, the shapes became clear. They were frames, dozens of them, scattered in a subtle arc. Some were wooden with faded gold trim. Others appeared to have once been decorated with silver inlays. A few were plain, stripped of ornamentation by seawater and time. Most astonishing of all, several frames still contained photographs. The voices in the control room fell away. For the first time in their careers, they were not looking at relics of the ship, but at relics of the passengers themselves. Faces and figures, captured in time, preserved against all odds. Some images were barely recognizable. Ghostly outlines, smudged silhouettes, blurred shapes, where smiles or eyes once existed. Yet others, though faded, still carried enough detail to suggest personality, expression, and intention. People who had dressed for a portrait, unaware that their images would someday rest at the bottom of the sea. The ROV approached the first frame. Its wood was cracked and swollen, but a faint glimmer of gilding remained. Inside the frame was a portrait of a woman wearing an elaborate Edwardian hat with long feathers. Her chin was raised, her posture confident. The features of her face had softened into shadow, yet the elegance of her attire suggested she originated from a wealthy family, or at least from the ship's first-class passengers. On the back, the faint letters A, M, and L appeared barely. Visible, but enough to kindle hope that one day historians might identify her. The next frame held the portrait of a young boy. He wore a sailor outfit, holding a small wooden boat with both hands. His face had faded, yet his posture and the outline of his smile were still visible. The photograph radiated innocence, the kind that brought a hush over the entire control room. The researchers knew all too well that many children aboard Titanic were emigrating with their families, hoping for a new beginning in America. The boy's image instantly became one of the most emotionally significant discoveries the team had ever encountered. Near the boy's frame lay another, this one more puzzling than all the rest. The portrait depicted a couple, but they were standing with their backs to the camera. The man wore a bowler hat, the woman held a parasol, and they faced an open shoreline. The pose was unusual for its era. Most portraits from 1912 were formal, frontal, and highly structured. This one was artistic, almost symbolic. The unidentified nature of the couple, the lack of visible expressions, and the mystery of why they had posed this way stirred a deep sense of wonder in the team. Some speculated it represented longing or farewell, possibly even an engagement photo or a sentimental gesture between the two. Whatever its purpose, the image defied typical Edwardian convention. Each frame was carefully lifted by the ROV using extreme micropressure tools. The frames were placed inside nitrogen pods to prevent deterioration caused by sudden exposure. Even the slightest fluctuation in temperature or air composition could destroy the fragile artifacts. Hours passed as the ROV continued its retrieval, scanning repeatedly to confirm that no frame had been missed. When the frames were finally brought onto the Horizon Sentinel, the crew gathered around with quiet reverence. The night sky above them was clear, and the cold wind carried the scent of salt and history. The frames were immediately transferred into the preservation vault, where they would remain stable until transport to the imaging laboratory at the Atlantic Historical Imaging Laboratory. Experts began the painstaking process of restoration. Every frame was placed under hyperspectral scanning equipment capable of detecting different wavelengths of light. The faded pigments of the photographs responded differently under infrared, ultraviolet, and multispectral bands. With each scan, hidden details emerged. Lines of clothing appeared. Faint backgrounds resurfaced. Even facial contours, nearly erased by water, began to reassemble digitally. As the restoration progressed, new mysteries surfaced. The woman in the feathered hat appeared to be wearing a brooch with a symbol that was still recognizable under enhancement to stylized rose. Experts compared the brooch to Edwardian jewelry catalogs, finding nearly identical pieces produced by a well-known London jeweler around 1908. This detail narrowed the potential passenger identities. The boy's toy boat revealed faint paint strokes, suggesting that his family possessed means to afford such a personalized toy. The parasol held by the woman in the unique rear-facing couple's portrait was decorated with a delicate floral pattern that became more visible under ultraviolet analysis. These details became crucial clues for genealogists and historians. During the restoration of the gilded frame, technicians found a hidden fragment of paper lodged tightly beneath the backing. It had survived because the frame's backplate had sealed during the sinking, preventing water from reaching the innermost layers. The fragment turned out to be part of a merchant's travel ledger. It listed cargo destinations in Marseille, London, and New York. The final line referenced Titanic's departure on April 10, 1912. This discovery hinted that the family associated with the frame may have been engaged in international trade or traveling for business purposes. News of the discovery spread rapidly across the world. Museums issued formal requests to study the photographs. Descendants of Titanic passengers contacted the researchers in hopes of identifying lost relatives. Television networks requested interviews